class tomorrow, I just wanted to finish up our conversation about Norbert Elias. This will be a little bit shorter. I'm going to try to keep it concise, but I do want to hit on some of the main points. Elias is someone that had influence on a number of people that we'll read later in the semester. He's had influence on my own work in some ways. He's had influence on a lot of scholars, contemporary scholars that I engage with, or sometimes I disagree with them, but there's a lot of parts of Elias that I really like. So I wanted to make sure that we finish it up. The other thing that I wanted to say was reminding you again on Monday, make sure to read Karen Cerullo's article, Sense and Sensibility, Olfaction, Sense-Making, and Meaning Attribution. This is a recent article. It's only a few years old. It's in the top sociology journal. It's a little bit dense at times, especially in the section right after the introduction where she presents a number of different contemporary theories on different types of knowledge. I'll explain those to you. That's some of the stuff that I write about in my own research, so I'll explain that to you on Monday so you can skim through that section. But make sure you pay attention to the intro where she explains what she's doing, the methods, how she actually does the research, and then the findings, discussion, and conclusion where she tries to explain, well, obviously what she found, but the significance of what she found as well. All right, let's go back into Elias. So we ended last time. I gave an overview of his bigger ideas. I'm also sending you another video. It's kind of a nice, well-produced video. I think it's like 13 minutes long that goes over Elias's bigger ideas, probably better than I did last time. So make sure you watch that. Last time we stopped with the reading. I want to get back to kind of bigger picture stuff, and then we'll get to the whole blowing your nose thing and also sleeping in a bed in just a little bit. So first, thinking big picture again. What Elias is doing, specifically in the section that you're reading, is he's looking at the different ways that you see a shift in values, right? Where the same stuff I brought up before, that shift in values between we have these short-term desires, emotional needs, things that we want to do, and this longer consequences of human action, which are suddenly a greater part of the conversation, and also you're involved with increasing networks, right? So there's more and more pressure to regulate yourself. So you're trying to balance out those desires and thinking about, well, these are the things that I should be doing, right? And we can think about where this idea of should be doing actually came from. In particular, in the section we're looking at, you can't remove it from class, right? He's looking at how there's all these new symbolic ways to distinguish higher society. And so class in this case is looking at the court. There's this creation of proper etiquette and manners that the people in the court follow to differentiate themselves from the working class or poor, the people who are serving them, right? But there becomes pressure on the people serving them to also regulate their manners, to also regulate their behavior. And this could be coming from two directions. It could be coming from the ruling society saying, hey, you have to do things in a certain way because now we find it repulsive or shameful not to do it that way. And also comes from people trying to imitate higher society, right? Saying, well, this is how people who are refined do this thing. These are the things that we also want to look like. We want to engage in the same type of symbolic behavior. And a lot of things go back to this history, right? You can think about if you look at the history of people wearing ties, how it spread beyond the royal and the wealthy out to the masses, trying to have that same symbolic capital. And it could be from pressures from up above. This is how you're supposed to dress when you're in the court. This is how you're supposed to dress when you're working for me. Or people saying, well, this is how I want to dress to also distinguish myself. You could think about taking an etiquette class, right? Look at something like this. What is this all about? There's all these different intricate rules. And what this does is it becomes a sign of distinction for the people of high society, the nobles, the aristocrats, the people of incredible wealth, and the people who want to be like them. This knowledge doesn't really have any purpose, right? If the goal is simply to get calories in the body, to get food in your mouth, to enjoy food, this doesn't really do that much for it, right? Before this, you simply had, what were the two? I think in Western society, it was simply a knife and spoon, right? Those were the first real two utensils. That's all you really need. But people took etiquette lessons. They began to, have certain cloths on the table, certain order of the meals, right? And all this is doing is, again, removing it from the basic animal function, eating simply because you like the way it tastes and you want the calories in your body. And this could spread to other areas, right? Suddenly you're tucking in your covers and you're making your bed. But if you're noble enough, you're even further removed from the act. You're actually paying people to do that for you. Same here. If you're at a fancy enough restaurant, You don't clean the crumbs off the table. Between the courses, people actually come around with these nice little brushes and brush the crumbs off your table before they serve you the next course and replace all your silverware. Because imagine eating food with something that already has food on it, right? The idea is to get further and further removed from the act. And Elias talks about food in a lot of different cases. You could think about modern food because he uses the example of our separation from meat. This has even become more extreme, right? We don't go to the daily, to the neighborhood local butcher or to the deli. We're further and further removed from the animal. You go to the supermarket, the grocery store, and you see all these brightly packaged products that don't even have pictures of the animals that we're eating in most cases, right? You're further and further removed from the slaughterhouse, from the farm. It becomes this thing that is very controlled, regulated, and not animal-like, even though it's one of the most basic animal-like functions. And this occurs in a number of different ways. The other thing that's key is we see the creation of public and private, a distinction between that what you do where other people can see it, and that's what you do where you are alone, where only other people who are close to you might see it. And if you think about the distinction between what we call public and private, a lot of it is about those things surrounding the body, right? Emotions, showering, going to the bathroom, sleeping, sexual activity, right? All those animal things that we do, those are the things that people say should be done in private. Anything related to the body gets hid. Even brushing your teeth, right? Things like brushing your teeth or putting on deodorant, right? If someone's putting on deodorant on the bus, maybe it's not that big a deal, but it still seems kind of weird. It seems like something that should be done in private. It's being done in public. You don't care, but it still seems kind of strange, right? All those type of things. If you see people, say there's a couple who is very enamored or attracted to each other, and there's this public display of affection where they're holding each other and touching each other and kissing each other a lot. What's the classic line that people might say as they go by them? Get a room, right? What that basically means is take that thing from the public and move it to the private, right? All those type of things. And again, back to the examples we used last time, but the different ways that we used to treat very animalistic acts as being public. If you would gnaw bones at the table, right? If you were eating food, and then you would return them to the serving dish. If you have to go to the bathroom, you just get up and you go to the bathroom and then you return. Picking your nose was common. Newlyweds might have sex in front of an audience or in the same room as other people, right? Sometimes it'd be ritualistic, but sometimes it'd just be, well, that's just where they were having sexual activities, right? So all those different ways, thinking about next week, thinking about how we wash ourselves and put certain perfumes on our body to hide that we're animalistic, that we wash our clothing, not only when it's dirty, but even when there's a hint of dirt. We wash it over and over obsessively, right? If you go to the bathroom before someone else comes in, you might be embarrassed if they can smell what just happened. You might light a candle, you might light a match. Now, some of it's being polite, but a lot of it, is it just because you want to help the other person? Or is, as Elias would point out, there's a sense of shame that goes along with it, right? And then thinking to the reading that we specifically had, Elias goes through in intricate detail the way that we treat blowing our nose specifically traveled from court practices to the masses, and how there were more and more shifts, and each shift removed us further from this bodily thing of removing what is in our nose to outside our nose. Or we could think about the role of nudity in the reading, right? He said nudity used to be this very common thing. It wasn't treated as exceptional. When people were going to the bathhouse, he said it would be common to see girls of all ages, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, and so on. If they're traveling from their house to the bathhouse, which was shared, well, of course you'd be nude, or maybe you just have like something small over your body. Same with boys of any ages from 10, 12, and up, right? It wasn't that there was an acceptance of sexual desire towards towards children and younger adults. No, it was that nudity wasn't seen as inherently sexual. The body wasn't hidden. It could be something that could be in public, and it didn't have to be only for private acts. Think about sharing beds. This is one of the most fascinating parts of this reading. It used to be very common for a whole family to sleep in the same bed. It used to be very common if you go to an inn and you need a room at night, well, how much room is in the bed? And you'd be sleeping right next to a stranger. Strangers might even just hold each other for warmth or just comfort, not because it was sexual, because it was just two bodies or three bodies being in the same bed, right? It was just something that made sense. You're next to a person, so you hold them. Then it became more and more controlled. The bedroom became a place only for the sleep of one or two people or for sexual acts between one or two people. And it began to be seen as strange to sleep next to more people. Even the schedule of sleep became more controlled. It wasn't that you just slept throughout the day when you're tired, but you followed a set schedule. And this, again, can't be removed from the class or capitalist background. It's as we became workers, this was part of it, right? But all these different ways that the body and all the activities related to these natural things became relegated to the private. All right, some other points, and this is taking us away from the reading to his larger theories, so I'll do this rather quickly. Now, one of the questions people often have when they read Elias is, does all that energy and excitement simply just disappear? Because remember I talked about how our excitement and we have more and more control, more and more self-regulation and self-control. So what happens with all that energy, excitement, those outbursts that we used to have? He says no. Instead, what happens is our excitement gets channeled into more acceptable spheres and arenas, places that he says you can have a controlled decontrolling of emotions, meaning it's specifically about guiding the places where we can have excitement, where we can have sadness. Some of that is guiding it to private. If someone's too sad or too happy, you say, go into that private circle of your friends, go back to your home to have those emotions. Don't show them in public. Or we could go to places where we get to act in ways we can't in other places. Sports is one of the common examples. Leisure activities. You go to a concert, you go to a heavy metal concert or a punk show or an emo, and you go in a mosh pit, right? You go to these places, you go to a rave, you go to places where you can release these emotions. He says those places become more and more essential, but even those places become more and more controlled. So final points I'll bring up if you're thinking about what do you actually take away from Elias, watch that other video. You can read through this outline I have at the end. Key things to remember, this is related to class. This is related to the increasing division of labor, meaning we're part of more complex webs. This is a functionalist argument in a sense because he's thinking about how society continues to run. However, he does it in a more critical way than someone like Durkheim if you're comparing social theorists, not something you're required to do in this class. And then the other key point, which we brought up last time, but it's really essential. He says shame has overtaken joy and pleasure as a dominant guide of how we act. And I think it's worth reflecting on that because I think it's true. And he's pointing out that's not a good thing, right? He's saying it's a civilizing process, which people might read as a positive thing. This overtaking the dominance of shame, he's not celebrating that. The removal of our body, the emphasis on the individual, right? The individual contained self that we have to control. He doesn't think that's good. Our fear of other people, our lack of acknowledging the networks that we're part of, all of these are processes that he worries about. All right, so that's Elias. We will pick up next class with Karen Cerullo, and I hope you enjoy that reading.